Hello, and welcome to Health is the Key, the podcast that explores the health and wellness issues that matter to 1199 SCIU healthcare workers. I'm your host, Elizabeth Moore. Today we're talking about mindful eating, a practice that has been around for years, but for a lot of us may be brand new. Yet studies show that focusing on the what, when, how, and why of eating can not only help us make more healthful food choices and support weight loss, but even improve our overall well-being. Sounds pretty good, no? So to learn what it's all about, we're joined today by Janet Lau, an integrative registered dietitian who sees patients through her private practice, Nutrition Custom Care. We'll ask Janet to explain the basics, share her own journey, and offer some tips on how we can work mindful eating into our own healthy living journey. Welcome to Health is the Key, Janet Lau.
Thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth.
We're very excited to have you here. So as I said, it's mindful eating has been around for years, but can you just give us sort of the basics of what it's all about?
Sure. So mindful eating is basically when you are paying full attention to just eating. You're removing all your distractions, putting everything aside, your workload, any phone calls, and you're being present to the activity of eating. And now you're present to all the flavors, the colors, the textures of what's in your mouth. And you're excited about this moment.
And we've heard so much about mindless eating. This is the opposite of mindless eating.
Absolutely. I have a lot of patients with that mindless eating because people are normally reactive, right? They're just, going with emotions. They have heavy demands in the day. They're heading into work and getting into emails and phone calls, and then they forgot that they ate. And then, lo and behold, hours later, they're just famished. So now they're not really choosing mindfully at that point. They're just munching away without really being present to that.
Just going through the motions and not really getting what they should be getting out of a meal.
Unfortunately, that is what ends up happening when they're not being intentional in that moment.
Can you share a little bit how you became involved in mindful eating, how you chose it as a focus of your practice?
Sure. I love this question. For me, when I was young, I ate everything and anything. My flavor palette was drawn to greasy foods, sweet foods, salty foods. So you name it, I had it. And that was exciting for the moment, but it came with GI symptoms. And as I got older, I continued to be drawn to those flavor profiles. So those adverse symptoms didn't end and they got worse. I had weight fluctuations. I had skin issues. I had the ups and downs. So I decided I needed to do something. And I did what everybody else did. I went through fad dieting. I did food restrictions and I was miserable. So what I did was resorted back to what was familiar, and that drew me back to the greasy, salty, sweet foods. And I didn't feel well. And that was my relationship with food growing up. So as I got older, I said something needs to change. So I went through educational institutions to learn more about how can I improve on this and feel better. And in those studies, I understood that I needed to pause. I needed to find a way to understand what was working and what isn't working. And through that observation, I started to realize that I need to find out what my food boundaries are in order to gain some balance. And that's the work I still do today. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of instruction did you receive, or who did you go to? Like, I don't know if I would know who to go to get help with this.
Well, I definitely give a lot of credit to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. I mean, they shared a lot of different therapeutic diets and basically how to pause and work on that mindfulness. And that was something that was very intuitive. I think as I got older, I started to realize that there was something I needed to do to pause, to slow down, because I was eating so fast, chewing my food, not really thinking about it, not necessarily being present. So when I started doing these activities, I would realize, wait a minute, that was really sweet, or that was way too salty, or I'm overeating this and I'm needing to unbuckle. So I'm getting all these adverse symptoms, and then So as I continued to figure this out, what was working and what wasn't working, then I started to adjust. Maybe I should go towards this other flavor profile or eat less. Things like that started to appear for me. So that's my journey that I still practice today.
So slowing down allows you to feel how the food that you're eating is affecting your body and saying, oh, wait a minute, I don't feel so good after eating that. Maybe I should avoid that.
100%.
So that's very interesting. And that, it's interesting too, what you said about getting home at the end of the day. And our healthcare workers are very busy. They have busy lives. So unfortunately, we do tend to eat on the run and think we're getting the calories and the nutrients that we need, but we're not getting them in the right way.
Yeah, I have healthcare workers as providers. I myself, healthcare worker, so I understand busy days for sure. And what I usually say for busy people is really the planning ahead part. We really need to find out what our schedule looks like, so that we can carve out that self-care time and take those moments for ourselves. And I find that planning ahead and preparing is what many people should do, especially when they're busy. During the work week, it's hard to come home and have to cook, right? Because you're already burnt out or really exhausted. So the easy answer for many of us is to order, right? Which is not necessarily the healthiest. So, I share with them batch cooking on the weekend. So at least you have a couple of days of home brought food with you, ingredients that you can control. And then you just either bring it in a thermos or some kind of, bento box.
Right.
Not another battle for you to figure out.
Right. Well, I love that you said self-care because that's what this really is all about, nurturing yourself. So I'd love to hear more about the health benefits that doing this bring to you. If you could explain a little bit about those.
Oh gosh, I think they're infinite. I think you get that quality of life. You get to know exactly what foods nourish and fuel you, right? Because that's, in the end, we want to feel well, right? Otherwise, what is this all for? We want to be able to, walk without feeling winded, to run for the train that we're needing to catch without breaking out in a sweat and palpitating. There's a lot of small things, but definitely a lot of big things. We want to go on vacation with ease. Some of my patients have these health conditions, right? High blood pressure, blood sugar. All of that can be basically controlled if you're planning ahead.
So planning ahead seems key to not only eating well, but eating the right things and in the right manner.
Planning ahead is everything. Yeah, I think anything worth investing and putting that commitment, you need to plan for. For
And
sure.
it's great that it's not a diet. It becomes a way of life. It's a way of life for you, certainly now. So how can our members get started doing this? Planning ahead. I got that. But, how can they, on their break, how can they start mindful eating?
I would say put your work aside. That's for one. Just be with your food, smell the smells, enjoy the textures and the flavors that you're having. Put away your phones and devices. We're so used to scrolling and our attention is put there versus what you've been working towards to nourish and energize yourself. Otherwise, you might forget that you've eaten sometimes, right? And then you need to get that second meal in to feel like you've actually nourished yourself. Some of the ways is really just removing distractions. I would say sleep hygiene is really important, right? Because when you're not rested, then a lot of times you're resorting to food to energize. I would say stress management is important because a lot of times we use food to cope with stress. So it's important to find other strategies to do that. But certainly food is very helpful to get the cognition, the fuel that you need to combat those stressors.
So it sounds like it's not just about eating. It's about sort of managing all the things around it. So we hear a lot about eating emotionally. Is there a way you can eat emotionally mindfully?
That's a great question. I think you should always eat emotionally. It should be a very joyous and fulfilling experience because everything that you've done to lead up to the moment to eat is your self-care time. What I want to make a distinction is that you don't want to solve problems with food.
Mhm.
And that's where I find some of the hangups come in because patients are emotionally suppressing their feelings or their problems with food. So yes, you should have a joyous emotional experience when you're eating, but not to resolve problems through food.
Right. So turning to cupcakes when you're feeling sad even I think a lot of people think in addition to emotional eating, there's boredom. People
Mhm.
eat out of boredom. I know I do.
Mhm. I would say in those moments when you kind of need something, drink a cup of tea, which is nice and warm and soothing, kind of feels like a big hug. So that's totally acceptable.
And that's where I think mindfulness really comes into play is that when you start asking yourself these questions and you say, am I eating because I'm bored? Am I eating because I'm mad? Because I'm sad? Then you start recognizing your patterns.
That's the beauty of this work so that you can track it and better understand your food awareness and your behaviors around what are your triggers.
We've always heard that it's very important to eat with your family. But now I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. Like, isn't that a distraction if while you're eating, you're chatting with your family?
Yeah, I actually say that in session that distractions can become with company, but these are moments that we want to experience, right? So not to remove company because that's the valuable part. We get to socialize around food. What I would suggest is make sure that you are actively listening, but really mindfully chewing. So you can totally take in and absorb the content, but not necessarily swallow sooner to insert your comment. So just wait until you're finished with your bite or the topic is, coming to a close so they can finish what they are saying without you inserting something or swallowing sooner to insert something. So that way you're totally enjoying the experience, what's happening in your mouth as well as like what you're listening to.
Now, let's say you are by yourself. What are some how-tos of mindful eating? Say I'm sitting down at my lunch table by myself, no distractions, no TV. Do I chew 22 times or something like that?
Yeah, that's a fun question. So what I would suggest is really if some people work in small spaces and we tend to work and eat at the same time. So what I would suggest is just remove all your work material from that table or actually have a dining, area that you just designate for that purpose. And set yourself up, whatever condiments you want to have on that table and your entree, whatever is happening with food that you want to see and smell. And I would say also, if you want to make it a little bit enjoyable, because some of us really like to listen to something, light music is a great way to enjoy your food, just like if you were in a cafe. So you're kind of dimming the light or sitting next to the window so you can take in that breath of fresh air. So it's your time, right, to self-care.
Right, for sure. Do you find that you advise your patients on nutrition as well as on the practice of mindful eating? Because I was thinking, well, if I eat a bag of potato chips really slowly, that's mindful eating. So do you need to remind patients, well, you should probably try to get protein, carbs?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
100%. I think to eat, you got to have all your macronutrients, right? To make it a complete plate. You want your protein, you want a healthy starch or root vegetable, you want lots of vegetables and color so that you're not just eating one food that can get bland and then you can overeat. If you're having a mixture of all these different flavor profiles, color profiles, then it's a little bit more exciting, more nourishing, and then you feel that much more fulfilled.
And when a patient begins this practice, how long do you think it would take them before they started noticing the benefits? I can picture myself saying, well, geez, I've been doing this for a week and I don't notice any difference. So When can you start expecting the health benefits?
I mean, I think it's very subjective, like from person to person. You can experience it right when you start, honestly, because, especially if you're new and unfamiliar to this, it's going to take some time because, while you're eating, you're like, what's going on? And then you're mentally thinking about something else. And then the chewing is what's going to help bring that back. So every time, it's kind of like meditation. Every time you find yourself going out and thinking about work stressors, you come back to your food so that you can taste the flavors and remember this is your time, right? And you're trying to designate this for you. So I would say whatever you're thinking about, reel it back in and then really enjoy the smells, the flavors. I think it just depends on your investment to it, right? The first time it may seem new and a little bit uncomfortable because now you're on your own, without the scrolling of devices. The second time you may get a little bit used to it and you're noticing, I don't need to finish this plate for some reason. I'm satisfied sooner. Maybe next time you're like, wait a minute, don't need to unbuckle today. Every experience, it'll evolve and change over time. So I would say, you can always self-discover something.
I like that you said that it's sort of like meditation, and I feel that some may feel, well, I'm not very meditative, and I think mindful eating is open to everyone. So, what do you say to people who say, I'm not into that, new agey stuff?
Right.
How can they get started?
Well, the simple thing is I always tell patients, let's start chewing from anywhere from 15 to 30 times, right? So they're really focused on the act of chewing. And really what we want is that bite that you're eating is totally pureed, right? That's what we want, right? More digestion like in the mouth. And so when it goes down the pipeline, your GI is ready for nutrient absorption at that point. But, over time, they start noticing things. They'll lose count for sure. The point is not to really count. It's really to be in the moment and to stay in that moment. So you're enjoying your meal. So I think that over time, it's a matter of just getting them acclimated to not chew so fast, to take their time while they're eating, to self-discover, and possibly to even track. So this is a work in progress, right? We want to always learn something. So when they're tracking, they'll discover, wait a minute, I just noticed I don't need to finish the plate. And I always was told to finish my plate, but I really don't want it, So now you can finally put that leftover aside. And you'll start seeing more and more things, right? You're not maybe having that acid reflux, indigestion reaction. You're feeling more satisfied. Feeling like full is maybe uncomfortable. Maybe very full is more uncomfortable. So these are things that you'll start to notice over time. So just really the act of slowing down. The point of chewing is not to chew necessarily. It's just to make sure that you are slowing down. So over time, it becomes routine and habit.
Well, it's interesting, too, that you said, I didn't realize until now, that by chewing more helps digestion, which will have many repercussions after that. Chewing isn't just about slowing down. It's about helping your digestive system.
100%. I mean, we do have teeth. Let's use it.
For a reason.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you about slip-ups, because people are so hard. Oh, I was bad today, or I didn't eat good foods. So how do you get patients over their slip-ups? How do you get them back on track?
So I would say focusing on your rest and sleep hygiene. I think that's really important so that we're using food to fuel, not to make up for tiredness, because there's no amount of coffee that will replace a good night's rest. I would also say work on your meal schedule. I think that's really important because when you are eating at, adequate times within the day of these, 4, 5, 6 intervals apart, then you're feeling more nourished versus waiting hours on end when you might have not had a good breakfast to begin with or had breakfast at all. I would also say it's important to find stress management, to work on that, because then you're not using food to cope.
Mm-hmm. And it's not an all or nothing thing. If you slip up, it's just as with any food plan. If you slip up, just start over again, but it's hard when people get so hard on themselves.
Yeah, I think we need to practice more self-compassion, right? Positive self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, even for myself, I think it's important to note what happened and what went wrong,
Mm-hmm.
so you can improve on it next time. You're always learning. So what happened? What can I do better? What do I need to work on?
Mm-hmm.
Those, I think, moving forward is an important note to self versus, well, I screwed up, so might as well self-sabotage and keep going, right? Which is always the other end of the spectrum that I think people return back to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think everything is a learning experience. So not to, beat yourself up for it, but move forward. Let's see what we could do better next time.
Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned keeping track. I always wonder whether keeping a food journal makes you focus too much on what you're doing, and then you just start spinning out of control, like, oh no, I didn't chew 20 times, I didn't chew 18. Do you find that helps, or does it get in the way for some people?
Well, in our practice, food journaling is a way to track, to understand your food boundaries, to get to balance. So otherwise, how do we know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what we could use improvements in? So I'll give you an example. I had a patient, and she came to us for weight loss purposes. And one of the tools we used was that food journal. And the food journal is pretty much, what did you eat? What time? How did you feel? Right? And so when she shared a couple of pages, one of the days she went to a sushi restaurant and she ordered 30 sushi rolls. And she's a petite girl. She's like 5 feet. And she wrote down that she felt very full. And that's not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second day, she did the same exact thing, eating 30 rolls. Mm-hmm. So I shared that experience with her so that she can see her common denominators of what could use improvement. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's other questions that we could prompt, right? How long, did you eat prior to that? But in the end, she noticed that maybe lesser amount is probably a good way to go.
Maybe just 20.
Maybe just 20, see how you feel, right? Or maybe just 15. So it's a work in progress.
So it sounds like a really good tool. Yeah.
It's a great tool. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've given our members a lot to chew on. Is there anything that you would like to leave as a takeaway for our members to get started, to keep going if they're already trying mindful eating?
It's always going to be a work in progress. So I would say don't fixate on the goal.
Mm-hmm.
I would say work on the progress. And if you work on the strategies to get to your, destination, then you'll feel a little bit more, I think, excited about this work. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like, just to give it some context, people are so focused on, I want to lose weight. I want to lose this much. Mm-hmm. And there's always strategies to get there. It's not just a destination, right? It's almost like, I always have this analogy. I want 100 on my test, but we can't focus on that. We have to work on, what are we going to do to get to 100, right? You have to study. You have all these different strategies, modalities to get there. So when you get good at those strategies, fueling yourself to get there, then you feel a little bit more confident that you're going to get to your destination. That's what I would recommend.
So it's, as we say here, it's all about the journey.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We learned a lot, and thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Tune in later this month for our April keynote to hear Janet Lau talk about the tools and support that can make your mindful eating journey a success. For more information on what you heard today, please check our show notes. And remember, subscribe to Health is the Key wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast and its content are presented solely for general informational and entertainment purposes. The information and opinions provided on this podcast are not intended as legal or medical advice and do not constitute or serve as a substitute for professional medical or psychological treatment, diagnosis, therapy, or other types of professional intervention.